everybody, and welcome to part 6 of the Implement Dynamics 365 Human Resources series. Today's topic is compensation management. My name is Cora, and I'll be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this session through Teams live events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. This session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. When you join this event, your name, email address, and/or phone number may be viewable by other session participants in the attendee list. By joining, you're agreeing to this experience. The recording will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. If you have questions for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions throughout today's presentation. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have Umar Sardar, Senior Program Manager, and Rachel Profit, Senior Fast Track Solutions Architect. Umar, over to you.
Thank you, Cora, and thanks everyone for joining this Tech Talk session. With me, I have my colleague Rachel and Walker. They will be answering questions. Quick introduction and contact details for me. I'm a senior solution architect from Microsoft Fast Track Americas team. I'm also part of HRP crew team. And these are the details and contact information for Rachel. And I believe most of the community members are already familiar and have interacted with Rachel. So Rachel is a senior solution architect from Fast Track Americas team, and she leads the HRP crew team. Before we begin, setting up some ground about Tech Talk and content we will be covering in next 45 minutes. We will review features for fixed and variable compensation. We will review compensation processes. We will also see demonstration for 2 simple compensation processing scenarios. This Tech Talk session is not a full detailed demonstration of the application, rather providing insight into capabilities offered and implementation guidance to the project team, along with handy resources like process catalog and configuration checklist. Another important point to highlight here is that the content for this Tech Talk is prepared from human resources feature being merged into finance and operations application. As most of you already aware, we are in a process of merging human resources standalone application to Dynamics 365 finance and operations application. For example, in standalone human resources application, implementation teams needs to manage separate LCS project, and extensibility is not possible unlike traditional X++. With infrastructure merge, human resources will merge into finance and operation application, so all the features and the programming approach for extensibility will be inherited automatically. There will be a separate Tech Talk dedicatedly for this topic in coming days. Talking about the timeline for infrastructure merge, let me show you the timeline for human resource feature and infrastructure merge capability. Here is a planned months and application versions. 10.25 is already GA'd, and the compensation management, which is our today's topic, along with other human resources features are available in operations application. We just need to go to the feature management and enable these human resources features. We are currently standing here, meaning you can install 10.26 from P program and can enable benefit management, leave and absence as preview in operation application. Few new features will be rolled out as preview in 10.27. And in July, migration tool for migrating existing human resources project into operations infrastructure and team environment. Teams integrations and rollout package template are also expected to be released as preview here. And finally, in December timeframe, we are expecting to have tooling available where you can merge or migrate existing human resources environment to existing operations environment. Now, coming back to the original Tech Talk topic, in the agenda, we will review compensation management with process catalog. We will discuss about compensation processing along with sample demos. We will also discuss about payroll integrations and guidelines around this area. And finally, do's and don'ts and checklist, which will help you to get started with compensation management processes. Starting with the compensation management overview. So compensation management helps you to manage standard compensation activities, including fixed and variable compensation plans, as well as spot, cyclic, short-term, or annual bonuses. Compensation management is used to control the delivery of base pay and awards. For example, an employee's fixed base pay and merit increase are controlled through fixed compensation plan. In order to get an overall idea of what capability Dynamics 365 Human Resources has to offer when it comes to compensation management, the catalog I'm going to present is good starting point for project team to begin with compensation management. Starting at the top of process catalog, we have created for compensation management, we have security roles. There are two core security roles that are used to define and process compensation. These are the compensation and benefit manager and human resources manager. Another security role exists for payroll manager to inquire about compensation and validate employees for payroll processing. And of course, you also have the ability to create custom roles based on your business needs. The next section of process catalog shows the business processes and configurations related to compensation management. We have broken the process and configuration down into two key areas, fixed compensation and variable compensation. You can see the first three processes across all areas. For example, business process for compensation processing is used to process both fixed and variable compensation plan. When we look at the key business processes for fixed compensation, this includes maintenance of compensation structure, updating employee compensation, and maintaining targets. For example, human resource manager can initiate compensation change for employee annual salary. When we look at the key configurations related to fixed compensation, you can first see that there are several configurations that cross all areas, including fixed and variable compensation. For example, you need to define eligibility rules for both fixed and variable compensation plans. Focusing on just the fixed compensation related configurations, we have things like levels, reference points, compensation grades, compensation actions, and fixed plan setup. Many of these configurations are mandatory for processing fixed compensation for an employee. Focusing on key business processes for variable compensation, we have things like variable plan enrollment and variable plan awards. For example, in order to allocate bonus awards to employee, that employee must be enrolled for that particular variable plan by using variable plan enrollment process. Next, we have variable compensation configurations. This include defined types, meaning cash or no cash, vesting rules, and variable plan setup. For example, vesting rule in this list is required when you are setting up stock awards as variable compensation plan. In the last pillar for our process catalog, we will focus on three key areas, including data management, integrations, and administration. Let's start with data management. There are many data entities that support the various processes and configurations shown here. The list of the entities you see here is by no means an exhaustive list. These are the key entities for compensation management. Next, we have the payroll integrations. Payroll integrations with external payroll system should be designed via Dataverse. We will go through details for this section in later slide. And finally, we have the administration components where we can review compensation process results, managing currency exchange rates, and generating payroll entities for payroll integration. The next section is processing compensation. When we talk about employee compensation hierarchy, compensation level and ranges are assigned to job, and the job is assigned to worker position. Based on current and active position assigned to an employee, that compensation level will be assigned. Compensation level assignment is key for setting up compensation structure for an employee. Now let's talk about compensation processing. Compensation processing start with definition of process, where we need to define setup configurations, include types, plan, and defining actions with parameters. Once setup is completed, compensation process executed, and based on execution, we can review results where we approve or ignore any particular entry. And at the end, it got loaded into employee compensation to reflect updates. Fixed compensation can also be changed from employee profile, where manager can add or update compensation, and based on workflow setup, it got submitted for approval. And once it is approved, it then got reflected on employee compensation. Let's review demonstration for fixed compensation processing. For demonstration purpose, I have only processed compensation for single employee. We still have an option to process multiple compensation plans and can results affecting multiple employees. This demo is a pre-recorded session. In this demo, we will see how payroll administrator can change fixed compensation. For demo, I will increase employee fixed compensation by 5%. Let me first verify employee current compensation. This employee has grade C assigned as fixed compensation plan, and his annual fixed compensation is 82,000 USD. We can change fixed compensation with multiple options. In this example, I will use compensation process functionality to update employee fixed compensation. I have already created sample compensation process. In this setup, I have added grade C as a fixed compensation plan, and I have increased the compensation by 5%. I've already selected employee in worker filter. I will run this process without batch job. Process is complete. I can see compensation process execution is completed as well. Now I need to review results where I will accept or reject compensation adjustments. I can see the compensation is increased by 5%. I can also see different comparison factors as well. From here, I can ignore or approve this change. In this case, I will click on approved. And then I will click on load employee compensation to load this compensation into the employee current compensation. Now let's verify if this change has been applied to the employee's current compensation. You can see there is a change applied to the customer current compensation, and his salary is increased by 5%, and this is his updated annual compensation. So after applying this compensation, the previous one, which was at the time of the hiring, it got disabled and expired, and the recent one, which is his salary increased by 5%, is now active. We have another demonstration where we will see variable plan award compensation process, and this demo is also pre-recorded. In this demo, we will see how payroll administrator can process bonus awards. We will use employee who is getting compensation in British pounds and his compensation is converting into USD while reporting. Let's first review the employee fixed compensation. His annual salary is 70,000 in British pounds. He's also enrolled in management bonus. And this bonus is 5% of employee salary. Let's now process the compensation. I have already created a sample compensation process. I have selected management bonus. I have selected this employee in worker filter. Now the processing is completed. Now if I review the results, I can see the 5% bonus award is assigned to this employee. I have an option to ignore or approve this awards. In this example, I will approve this. I will load this in employee compensation. Now let's review his rewards. I can see the management bonus is assigned to this employee. The value is calculated based on his salary. Now let's review how his employee's currency is getting converted into different currency. If I open the Teams view and go to the compensation, I can see the currency is getting converted into USD dollar, and this conversion is happened with the configurations of currency conversion in the system. So now I would like to utilize this time to explain few important features and functionalities from compensation management. I will walk through the performance functionality as it relates to compensation. In order to use the pay for performance feature in compensation processing, first go to the HR parameters and in compensation tab, make sure the rating resource is set to compensation. This will ensure the employee performance ratings are using the performance ratings for compensation, instead of the competency rating used for assessing skills. Next, create performance plans. Go to the setup and under compensation, go to the performance plans. And performance plans are basically a named rating model. Later, you will choose which ratings you want to use in your performance plan and what allocation each rating should get in that performance plan per department. Next, create performance rating. Ratings can be used by multiple performance plans. Rating can be expired as the company's rating system evolves over time. The combination of rating and the plan is assigned to an employee as his or her performance score to determine how their performance will impact their compensation. Do note that these ratings are separate from the rating models that are used on goals and performance reviews. Pay for performance allocations. Bring together the performance plan, performance rating, and the department to determine how compensation pay should be adjusted for each rating for a given department. Click on the fixed pay metrics and variable metrics button on the pay for performance allocation to specify which performance rating will be used by that performance plan and what the impact of rating should be on employee's compensation. In screenshot, an employee in the operations department who gets as rating 1, performance rating will receive 110% of their target merit increase in fixed pay metrics. In second screenshot, the employee in operations department who gets a rate 1 as their performance rating will receive 150% for their target merit increase in variable pay metrics. Performance ratings are used to employ by selecting the employee from the employee list. These buttons are not available in the all workers page when we go into the compensation performance button to open the employee performance form. Note that the compensation buttons will only be enabled for the employee who are actively employed in the current legal entity. Performance is recorded by selecting the performance plan, then performance rating, and then selecting the period effective and expiration dates to the time period evaluated. It is also important to note that this performance rating is not tied to the performance review. You will want to consider if you should configure a Power Automate flow, for example, populate the performance rating from performance review, and which performance ratings map to the review ratings. Also consider your business process for entering the expiry date. If your review process is on annual cycle, consider entering the expiry date when you create the rating on the worker. To factor the employee performance rating into compensation calculation, make sure to make the enable pay for performance checkbox on setup from process event. After the process event has run, for employee mentioned in the previous slide, it has rating 2 and 105% performance factor was taken into effect while calculating his merit compensation action. The next section is payroll validation. This process helps HR managers to validate employee profile completion for payroll processing. In employee profile and under payroll tab, we can click on validation button to initiate validation process. Once validation is completed, we can review results. In this screen, we can also review validation error details and guidance to set up missing configurations. For example, in this screenshot, employee's payroll residency and payroll work address is not set up. In order to resolve this error, we need to add these two address purposes under employee address section. Applying security on compensation plan is one of important setup. Under human resource parameter, there is a checkbox which controls user access to view compensation plans. Once this checkbox is enabled, then only roles with access to all plans will be able to view analytics in compensation management workspace. Once restriction is enabled, compensation management workspace will no longer access to all plans. In current Dynamics 365 Human Resources application version, for United States, text codes generate automatically based on default text regions of an employee. The text code generation will be deprecated soon. From configuration perspective, default text region menu is available under Payroll tab. In this screen, we select default text region. For example, I have selected New Jersey. Once you hit save, background process will initiate and text code for selected state will generate automatically. We can review generated codes after clicking Worker Codes under Payroll tab. Main text codes are not editable, but you can maintain text code parameters by navigating to maintain version links. And once the text codes are generated, then it would be utilized as an input for your external payroll system. In Dynamics 365 Human Resources, we have out-of-the-box dashboard availability. For these dashboard, you first have to enable aggregate measures from system administration and under entity store setup. On top of that, if there is a custom reporting and analytical requirement, you can always have multiple design options like embedded custom Power BI, export to data lake, and then utilizing it with your data warehouse and so on. And as we are in a process for merging standalone human resources feature into Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations app, then the native features under reporting is going to be inherited to human resources as well. Let's review brief details for out-of-the-box dashboards. Starting with compensation overview, it gives you analytics like average pay for hourly employee in your organization, average pay by function, plan statistics, male-female ratio as per plan. Demographic analysis give more insight and comparison like male versus female compensation per department. It also gives your statistics for ethnic origin. Position pay by analysis give you ability to analyze information like lowest and highest salaries, and then reviewing details and sorting from the grid. Compensation plan analysis further gives you data for headcount per plan, and based on selection, detailed grid reflect further information details of the employee. Let's now talk about important consideration for compensation processing. In specific scenarios, there is a requirement for monthly 14 pay rate conversion. It is to be highlighted here that it is not possible as enumeration is logged. Monthly 13 rate conversion can be defined and available out of the box. By using Dynamics 365 Human Resources, we can define multiple currencies. It is required in implementation scenario where organization is managing employee in different countries and payroll processing is as per country and currency. And in the demo, we also reviewed the employee having a different currency. And for currency conversion scenario, it is recommended to define process for maintaining exchange rate in human resource app. And then last, to finalize your payroll setup, employee tax information should be configured. The next section is payroll integrations. Dynamics 365 Human Resources application is not payroll processing system. In Dynamics 365 Human Resources, you configure employees' compensation plan and hold master information related to compensation management. For example, you define employees' fixed salary information, variable compensation plan like bonuses on higher stock awards in Dynamics 365 Human Resources. But employee will get paid by external payroll processing system. And for that, you need to integrate Dynamics 365 Human Resources with payroll system and pass employee compensation information. One important call out here is do not use Dynamics 365 existing payroll module as it is deprecated. In a typical payroll processing scenarios, we have 3 user roles: employee, HR manager, payroll administrator. From current functionalities and available feature set, employee and HR manager processes are being processed in Dynamics Human Resources application, and payroll API integration facilitate integrations between Dynamics 365 Human Resources and the external payroll system. The integrated experience begins in Human Resources with the employee profile, salary and detection, and contribution information. When you hire an employee and enter the required profile and pay information into the Human Resources, the payroll system pulls this information to use when processing payrolls. Any updates made to the employee or pay information are also pulled for use in a later pay runs. Let's now review process and architecture for payroll integration. It starts with Dynamics 365 Human Resources, where employee compensation information is stored. We have Dataverse, where payroll information will be stored securely and will be consumed by other business applications. Then we generate payroll entities. This process initiates from Dynamics 365 Human Resources, and payroll entities got created as Dataverse tables. Once entities are generated in Dataverse and information is getting refreshed periodically, we will then have Dataverse Web API endpoints to build integration interfaces. And in last, your external payroll system consume these web APIs to start integrating with Dataverse payroll entities. Payroll integration with Dataverse Web API is the recommended approach from us. We do not recommend to use dual rights for payroll integrations. Going into the details for payroll data model, this document provides information on entities that are specific to payroll integration scenarios. However, there are many other entities in Dataverse Web API for human resources that may also be relevant to your integrations. Some of these entities are referenced in foreign key relationships or navigation properties. The diagram illustrates relationship between payroll entities. Several types have foreign keys to other pre-existing entities in human resources that are not illustrated here. The next section is do's and don'ts. We have defined few recommendations which we strongly recommend everyone to follow, and similarly, there are some guidelines around don'ts. What we recommend are always configure employee text in profile to avoid issues in later stages where payroll process initiate. Always define compensation plans for each currency if there is a requirement for multiple currencies. We recommend to use Power Automate for variable compensation workflows. It is more efficient and aligned with the nature of compensation approval process. Always construct a workflow approval process for fixed compensation. And once compensation plan and processes are defined, the next step is to define regular maintenance process for it. What we do not recommend are do not try to create compensation plan for each worker. Maintenance will be impossible if you do it like this. Do not leave security as unattended area and define proper security roles around compensation processing. And finally, do not use dual write for payroll integrations. Instead, use Jetaverse web APIs. In the last section, we have checklist and resources. These are the checklist for fixed compensation. The checklist along with other reference links will be available to you. For fixed compensation, you need to make sure these setups are done. Starting with HR parameters for fixed compensation, define your currency exchange rate if there is a need for multiple currency compensation. Define fixed compensation actions. Define and set up workflows in Dynamics 365 Human Resources, which will be used for approval process once compensation added or modified. Define compensation levels which are required to be assigned with jobs. Create reference points for compensation. Define and structure your compensation grades with effective dates. Define fixed compensation actions which you will require while running compensation processes of fixed compensation. For example, promotion, hire, rehire. Define your compensation structure in fixed plan and define fixed compensation plans itself. Define pay rate conversion like annual, hourly, weekly, and monthly. And finally, enroll your worker in fixed compensation plan. This is the checklist for variable compensation. And for variable compensation, you need to make sure these setups are done. It also starts with defining HR parameters for variable compensation, defining your currency exchange rates, define variable compensation type like bonus, stock, awards, and there are two main types of variable compensation, which is cash and no cash. Define vesting rules for compensation plans like stock awards. Set up variable compensation plans itself and define level overrides in variable compensation plans where, as per your business requirements, certain condition triggers overrides. Enroll your worker in variable compensation plan. And finally, maintain variable compensation process regularly. This is the checklist for compensation processing. For that, first you need to define compensation regions, define eligibility rules. These rules define eligibility criteria, and based on that, employer record processed for when you're running the compensation processing. Define and create survey companies for market value. Define and maintain your merit increase targets. And define and create compensation process itself, while you define setup of compensation and configure types and action in it. And finally, define and create parameters for compensation processing jobs. For example, recurrences, and also the recurrences for the workflow setup jobs as well. This is the checklist for payroll integrations. For that, you need to start the configurations from payroll integration parameters in shared parameter form. Configure and validate employee as ready to pay, as I explained payroll validation process in earlier slide. Define, configure Dataverse virtual tables. There are steps involved, configurations in Power Apps, Azure, and Dynamics 365 Human Resources. And finally, generate payroll entities. This is one-time activity where you initiate requests for payroll entities in Dataverse. And that's, I think this is pretty much all from my side. Now I will hand it over to Rachel for Q&A.
Thanks, Umar. It doesn't look like we have any questions in the Q&A panel at this time. So if you do have questions, we invite you to put those questions into the panel and hit submit. We'll stay on for a few minutes. While we give you a few moments to do that, we'll go ahead and post a few announcements. The first one that we'll post is we'll give you the link to our frequently asked questions page about the HR infrastructure merge. I don't, Volker, do you already have that open and handy?
I'll take care of that.
Thank you. The other link that we'll provide for you is the release notes. As Umar said at the beginning of the session, 10.0.25 is now generally available, and you can find those release notes, which include the details of what exactly is included. There are some known issues with 10.0.25, so you'll want to keep that in mind. Some of the features are also still in preview. Not everything is generally available yet, so you'll want to keep that in mind when planning your implementations. And 10.0.26 is available if you are in the PEEP program. It doesn't look like we've got any new questions submitted yet. We'll give you another moment or so. Looks like Volker has put the infrastructure merge frequently asked questions in. And we'll get one more link for you to the release notes. All right, it doesn't look like we have any questions submitted, so I will hand it back over to Cora today to wrap us up. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you, Rachel. I've posted a link to a short survey in the Q&A panel. We'd like your feedback on today's session and hear what you'd like to see in future events. Thank you for your participation. As a reminder, the recording of today's session will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters and audience for joining us today.